Okay, here's some bonus stuff we didn't get to. You can do with it as you wish. So we kind of finished up the last lecture we did. We talked about understanding yourself, and that's probably one of the more important things you're gonna work on as you move forward. Understanding who you are and being able to communicate that to other people will be tremendously helpful as you go forward. So understanding yourself, what have you got? What do you want? What do you want to be? What are you good at? Who's going to pay you for those skills? And what do you need still to get where you want to go? Building a toolkit. The professor, I guess, when I was in grad school, he says, yeah, you got to build your toolkit, build your toolkit. And I asked him, I said, okay, you say this skill goes in there. What else skills go in there? And I kind of stumped him. It was kind of disheartening to see that. But we think about things, we learn things, and we go through, and we hopefully add to our skill set, add to our knowledge base to get where we want to go. So we talked about the different types of people, putting people into one of four categories, knowing who you are in this category, knowing who the people around you, what category they fall into. The more extreme they are into those categories, the more you need to know. The closer they are to the middle, it's not as critical as you treat them differently. So we talked about that in lab. If you want to go through, take the test and figure out which category you're in. It's a first step, not a definitive step, but a first step, another piece in understanding who you are. Another thing to think about is IQ tests. They give you a feel for what your understanding of the world might be. IQ tests tend to measure math and verbal abilities, but on a farm we use a lot of different abilities, and to be successful we need just more than that math and that vocabulary. So we need to think about multiple intelligence, and on a farm you may use pretty much every one of these. So that linguistic intelligence, the logical, mathematical intelligence, those are the standard things that are examined in IQ. But we're going to use a lot of other things to be successful on a farm. Spatial intelligence, that picture smart, how we lay things out in the field, how do we rake a field to make sure that the people that are harvesting are moving in the most efficient manner. How do we plant things to not waste seed but yet get the entire field covered? What animals got to go where, when, all those things. The bodily kinesthetic intelligence, to be able to use our body effectively and smart. So we're using our leverage as best we can and not damaging our body over time. Musical intelligence, this might be a little bit more limited on a farm, but who knows, maybe you sing to your cows. Interpersonal intelligence, being able to read people, being able to work with people, being able to communicate, huge on a farm. Even if you work by yourself, you're not going to be by yourself. You're bringing in specialists to do the things you can't do. You need to cover those as best you can. Intrapersonal, the self-smart, understanding who you are, communicating when you're having a bad day, communicating when you're tired, communicating when you're stressed, communicating, hey, I've got a great idea and it's time for people to listen to me. And then there's the nature smart, being able to look at a cow and say, you know, she's not right. We need to do something. We need to check her over. We need to think about what her problems are and where they are. So all these come into bear in farming. Yes, what do you want, Isabel? Okay. I'll feed you when I'm done here. We've got all these coming to bear on a farm. We need to think about these and sharpen them where we can. One thing about getting to know yourself, you need to consider fears. What are you afraid of? What are those around you afraid of? And you'll find that if you can figure out a person's true fears, you can find one of their greatest motivators. And if we acknowledge that, not necessarily discuss it, but acknowledge it, and we can work with those people a little bit better. So certainly when I was working for my family farm, I was the only one that was not afraid of heights. So that meant I always got delegated to go up the silo to make adjustments, to do the climbing that was necessary. So thinking about what we're afraid of, fear is a tremendous motivator. If we understand what we're afraid of, both, like spiders and snakes, but also letting our family down, looking like an idiot, those fears are also tremendous motivators. So people talk about the general human population. Each person has two areas of fears. One is the fear of change, and one is the fear of the unknown. And we can see that those are sort of related. We don't like change. We don't like the unknown. These two things have kind of saved the species. Well, we've got something that works. Let's continue to do it. We don't know what's on the other side of that mountain range. We're going to stay here. So in some instances, it's led to we keep doing the same things that have been successful. We continue the success into the future. We might divide those three fears into two fears: the fear of success and the fear of failure. Those might be two forms of change, and the fear of the unknown. So when you're young, maybe you don't understand these, but keep them in the back of your mind. Some people are afraid of success. Some people are fear of certain failures. Some people are afraid of different unknowns. And there's a lot of subcategories on all of those. If you take a look at the people around you and learn what their fears are, you can understand them a whole lot better. If you can acknowledge the fears that you have, you're on your way to truly understanding who you are. Another thing to think about, getting to know yourself, is something called Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And it addresses the fact that there are certain things that we need to be satisfied first before we can move on to other things. So they're presented as a pyramid, and we need to satisfy the things at the bottom of the pyramid before we can work our way up. So in this case, Maslow, 5 levels of human needs. The most basic are physiological, safety and security, shown at the base. As we move to higher levels, the needs become more complex, more cerebral, involving the brain and figuring out things. So we start with the physiological and safety and security. We're just talking about keeping warm, getting food, taking care of ourselves so we don't die. So if we don't have these things satisfied, if we're worried about where our next meal is coming from, if we're worried about sleep, warmth, exercise, all those things, we're not going to have time to spend on other projects, the things about creation, things about self-esteem, learning to be part of a group. We're going to be too preoccupied by the real basics. So if you want to move forward and grow as a human being, we need to take care of those basic or base needs before we can move up. And if we have people working for us, and they're having trouble in a number of different areas, they're not going to be able to focus on helping us grow our business, helping us go and do more important things, creative things. So hopefully our jobs and our situations, we are free from the fears or needs of the top two, and we can move on to the higher things. Right now, we've got a lot more of our thoughts in those bottom two with the COVID threat. Certainly me with older parents with some health issues. I'm concerned for their well-being moving forward, and because I'm down there, maybe I'm not creating as much as I should or could if I was free of those worries. So another way of looking at the same thing: physiological, breathing, food, water, sex, sleep, homeostasis, excretion. Those basic needs need to be taken care of before we move up to the next level. Security of the body, of employment, of resources, morality, of family, health, property. Then we move up to more creative, more fulfilling needs as we move higher. As those bases taken care of, we can become better problem solvers, more creative if we have other things and the support of others as we go through. Our bodily needs are taken care of. We can be creative. We can solve problems. We can move on to things that move forwards. One of the things we'll talk about, or I'll talk about, is balance. You're going to have to look for balancing a lot of different things in life. A person that was applying for a job once called it juggling. She was applying to be the leader of the animal science department where I was a grad student, and she talked about juggling. I need to be able to do research. I need to be able to do extension. I need to be able to do teaching. I need to help the department move all those through, and this is how I'm going to juggle those things for you. So you need a little of this, little of that. And this concept of balance, we talk about the yin yang. We need to balance the different areas, the opposites. And when we find that balance, we're usually better off in some way, shape, or form. So the classic examples of balance, we'll talk about education and experience. So right now, going through school, you're going to be heavy on education, a little lighter on experience, although at Morrisville, you're going to get a lot more of that than other schools. There's theory versus reality. So how do we think about things versus how do we actually do things in the real world? So me talking about things in class, the theory, and then the practical realities being out in the world. Sorting things out in your life, you're going to do thinking and you're going to do feeling. The idea is that we don't want either one to dominate how we get done, how we make decisions. The rational mind versus emotion is another way of thinking about that. As we grow through, we've got certain natural talents as we go through being part of the world. We are nurtured in a number of different areas. We are educated. So what innate abilities do we have? What other things do we learn or acquire along the way? Old versus new. So some of the good things that are old are still useful, still good, still practical, but we have to be open to the new things that come along as we move forward. We know we have strengths, we know we have weaknesses. We need to balance those out, using our strengths to minimize our weaknesses, working on the challenges of our weaknesses, trying to make sure that they're taken care of. Likes, dislikes, leading and following. Where do we have to lead? Where do we have to follow? Then you have to know which is which. It's important to know whether you're an ends person or a means person. I tend to lean toward the means. This was a stark contrast with a girl I was dating a long time ago. She was very much an ends person. And a discussion came up when she goes, I couldn't play softball if I played as bad as you. That's what she said to me. I was great at bat. I was not good in the field. But the grad students needed body, and I told them up front, I said I can hit, but I can't field. If you can accept that, I'll come and play. So they needed a body, and they said, come on, Mooney, play. She played first base, and she did that in high school and college, and she was pretty good at what she did. she was more important to her to win the game than it was for individual performance. I was like, well, if I can perform as well as I can and not screw up too much, I don't really care what the end thing is. I want to do the best I can with the skill set I have, and I can accept the outcome, whatever that may be. Knowing which of those two you are is probably pretty important in your life. You've got leadership and management, and know when is needed. We're talking about doing the right things is usually associated with leadership, and doing things right is associated with management. It's really hard to separate those two, but you have to do both to keep your dairy business moving forward. So those are some classic dichotomies that you're going to have to balance, you're going to have to work with as you go forward. Some things that might not show up. Sometimes you got to go like the military, lead, follow, or get out of the way, and figuring out which is the best way to go. Sometimes things need to be planned. Sometimes they need to be improvised. And knowing when to give up on a plan and move to improvisation, how do you adjust to both of those? The more you plan, usually the better it goes, but we have to know when we have to switch over to improvise, and how can we do that in a productive manner. Proactive versus reactive. We certainly want to balance between the two. Being able to react, being able to do what needs to be done is important, but we also want to bring in as much proactive as we can. We talked about maintenance versus productive or get ahead time. We want to ensure both are taken care of to move the business forward. There's a certain amount of ignorance is bliss versus the unexamined life is not worth living, or knowing is better. So sometimes it's great to be ignorant, other times it's better to know. Balance those things out, at least know where you are on those two scales. Active versus passive thinking. Sometimes I'm trying to divine a solution. That's active thinking. I need to balance that with passive thinking. I put a question out there, I put a question in my head, and see if I'm not thinking about it too hard, what answers come from different corners of my brain. The passive thinking. This is solving the world on a tractor seat. If you're out working fields, usually after a while you're pretty good at the things that have to happen. What your hands need to do, what turns you need to make, how you need to track through a field, and the brain has some time to think. So if you bring a question to those times, it's amazing the answers you'll get during that passive time. Data versus information, balancing those two. I'm collecting data, but I want to turn it into useful information that I can make decisions on. And as you go through your life, there's a whole lot more data on the farms than what we've figured out how to use moving forward. So in your lifetime, artificial intelligence is going to help you manage those large, huge amounts of information. Technical versus functional obsolescence. There's a lot of things that are useful still, even though they're not as up to date as they could be. We can take about our cell phones. Cell phone that's a few years old is still pretty functional, but it's certainly technically obsolete. We can think about any computer that you buy. As soon as you buy it, there's something better out there. It's no longer cutting edge. It's no longer functional as you move through. So shovels are certainly still functional, but that may not be the best of use of your time to dig out a hole or break up cement with a sledgehammer. It gets the job done. It still provides a function, but maybe we want to balance that with some technological advancements. Consistent versus adaptable. We need to have a little bit of both. We want to think about the rising tide raises all boats. How can we create business environments where everybody benefits for what we do, versus the zero-sum game where in order for me to win, that means somebody else has to lose. So the points available, the money available, if I win, somebody else has to lose. You probably need a balance of that moving forward. And then we bring up a classic example from Sesame Street from when my brother was a youngster, not when I was a youngster. The Grover classic of near and far. So near, and then he runs away back, and he's got the far example. So I'm not really sure what to do with those things. These are presented as things you might want to think about, keep in your mind somewhere moving forward. I don't know how to test these things. I don't know how to write an assignment related to them. I just bring them up in hopes that you will think about them as life goes by. Wisdom from Dr. Mooney.